Beautiful. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for coming to our January Sisters Chat, Service Interval Sisterhood. We host these calls about once a month and we talk about all things diving related and try and educate and stay connected in between our dive trips. So this month, we want something a little bit different, and it's going to be more of like a conversation call. We want to hear from you. We want you to interact with us. Danny's helping with this presentation so that it can be like a conversation between us two instead of just me monologuing to the camera. And Myra might pipe in as well as she sees fit. And yeah, I'm going to leave you off mute. If you have dogs or anything in the background, I might just click you on mute for whatever, but please, yeah, you can emoji if you would mind right now in the chat. You can let us know, what is your reason for traveling? Why do you like to get out? Why do you like to see the world? What kind of things do you like to see? Let us know in the chat. And I'm going to let a couple more people in. So for me, I love to meet people. I've met you on a trip. I think I've met all of you on a trip. I really like to get to know you and chat. And I love to see new places. Oh, so does Ginger. She loves to see new places too. I find the more I travel, the more commonality I feel with people around the world. Like the more I realize that we're kind of all the same and we have similar struggles and needs and that kind of stuff. What about you, Danny?
My primary reason is for diving, always. Obviously, but I find that everywhere I go, I love learning new things. I love learning about different places, histories and cultures and what they do kind of on their day-to-days. I like, even if I go to the same place that I've been a bunch of times before, I always learn something new.
And I find too, like when you see a place, you never feel like you've had enough time or like you got to see it enough, right? But then there's so many more places to see.
Exactly. Like even with the work that I do, and I'm somewhere for like, and I'm sure you feel this way too, like being somewhere for months at a time, like I leave, I'm in my last couple days, I'm like, oh man, I wish I did that, or next time I have to try that.
Yeah.
So it's cool to like see it a little bit differently each time.
Yeah, and like Myra said too, everyone dives differently. Like the culture on the boats is different, procedures are different. What you see, of course. And yeah, Pam, I love that quote. Travel's the only thing you spend money on and get richer. So true. I also love the quote that like travel is the death to prejudice. I think that's really powerful. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about today too. But first, I just want to tell you a little bit about this program. I mentioned it earlier, but we host these calls once a month and we talk about diving topics. We've talked about DCS, we've talked about conservation, we've talked about being a woman in diving, we've talked about gear, all kinds of stuff that is really useful to know, and you kind of learn as you go by luck, by association, by chance, by research on your own, but it's not really taught in the courses. So we try and hit all those knowledge gaps and find a way to connect between trips because none of us get to dive as much as we would like to. And Danny's going to tell us what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so kind of like Shev already mentioned, the goal today and the goal of this initiative that we like to do is to fill the gaps in diving education, learn as much as possible, and stay connected between dive trips. And we love being able to offer a free option as well, because as we know, diving and traveling is not the cheapest thing ever. So being able to still stay involved easily from home for free is always a good thing. So we run tea time programs, workshops, and conservation in courses and informal calls like this one. So for our agenda for this call, we're going to kind of welcome everybody and get to know everybody and set the context, talk about how travel impacts our planet a little bit, why we're having this conversation and some barriers to regulations and why it's an issue that we're seeing as we travel, how it relates to ocean tourism and how that ties to us as divers specifically. We're going to touch on animal sanctuaries because that's kind of a hot spot that comes up in ecotourism and traveling. Marine parks and their value kind of fall into that same bucket, and then initiatives that we can do to support and ways that we can stay educated and keep supporting good tourism.
And we just wanted to preface this call by saying that we're just going to talk about our experience, all of us, myself, Danny, our observations, and I did do a lot of research on this call for real things that are happening in the world and the impacts on tourism we're seeing. And we're just trying to be better. We're trying to be the best we can be, and these conversations help us. We are not telling you what you need to do or judging you if you have done any of these tours or activities. We're just trying to open the conversation for people who want to have it. And like I said, I'll meet you if I hear your dog or anything. But other than that, we'd love to hear from you.
So kind of getting a little bit more into why we thought this would be a good idea to talk about. Travel not only is for us and for our own growth and our own enjoyment, but it impacts other people, it impacts nature, it impacts the cultures that we visit and their economies. Just in the last, I guess, 2 years ago now, in 2024, the travel industry worldwide grossed $11.4 trillion, and that's expected to jump up to like 16, pushing 20 trillion, just in the next 10 years or so. So obviously, as travel becomes easier, more accessible with social media and all the advertising that gets around now, traveling will become a lot more frequent. And we need to care about the places that we're going to see. If we want them to stay nice and we want to be able to keep going back to them and bring our kids to them, then we need to do what we can to be responsible and sustainable in those places.
So what is sustainable travel? When you hear sustainable travel, what kind of things come to mind for you? Anybody? Danny, what kind of things come to mind?
For me, I mean, I'm a scientist. I work in science. So for me, I hear a lot about like citizen science trips where people who are just everyday people, or maybe they don't have a background in science, can go to a great destination on a vacation and still volunteer with some sort of organization to help with conservation or public outreach, something like that. So that's usually where my mind goes when I think of sustainable traveling.
Yeah, Myra said local economy. I think that's for me too. I think of like whatever is the opposite of a chain hotel or a resort is what I think of. So what is sustainable travel? When we say it, what do we mean? We mean that we consider the social, economic impacts and environmental when booking our destinations, tours, and activities. So there's not like doing this doesn't make you sustainable list, but just considering all these impacts of what you do is what we mean by sustainable travel. So we are intentional with our time and with our money. It is not, and I hear this a lot, nature trips and backpacking, eco resorts, like you hear those kinds of things where you have to like, you're only using outhouses and sleeping on the ground. That's not what we mean by sustainable travel, although I'm sure some of that is very sustainable. So what are the pillars of sustainable travel, Danny?
So the first one, and I think this is kind of where most people's mind goes because it's kind of synonymous with sustainable a little bit, is the environmental protection aspect. So obviously a lot of wildlife protection, waste management, energy sources and use, water source and use. So kind of like Shev mentioned, like, are we going places like eco resorts, and do they advertise some sort of using sustainable resources to build their structures, or do they have some sort of water recycling that they use? The second one that maybe is a little bit less obvious, social and cultural integrity. So experiencing culture versus just being a spectator, immersing yourself in that culture and respecting it, and not just showing up and looking at these locals like they're zoo animals in a cage. Fair treatment of the workers, yes, they're there working, but obviously they are still people too, and they are locals. And that goes for photography as well. Like there's a lot of places with quite different cultures, and maybe you don't know much about it, but there's places that it's, Shev, maybe you have some specific examples off the top of your head, but to us, it's like a photo opportunity, but to them, it's like a sacred monument or something. And just because of that difference in culture and maybe like the lack of knowledge, that could cause a problem.
Yeah, or even just, sorry?
Kenya, when we were in Kenya, You had to
Mhm.
ask before you took pictures. Like it was very insulted not to. So we learned that pretty
Yeah,
quick.
imagine if you were like walking your nephew to school or your kid and like someone just started taking pictures of you. It would be uncomfortable, right? And so having that same respect for people living there. And some religions too, like Danny was saying, the act of taking a photo is not in alignment with their beliefs. So yeah, always ask for taking pictures is something that is an easy thing that we can do.
Yeah. And kind of going off of that, how our travel and how our choices when we travel affect their local economy. So you have to follow the money. You have to do a little bit of research and ask yourself, are these places I'm going treating their workers well? Is this money staying within the country, or is it going to a giant corporation whose headquarters is not even in the country that you're visiting? So that's an important thing. Obviously at MHT, we always try and get local and smaller operators, and that's something we take very seriously. And that's exactly why.
Yeah, so these are kind of the, when we talk about sustainability, these are the kind of the core areas we're going to focus on. And the first one being environmental, especially as divers, this is really close to home, right? Because our form of entertainment is our hobby is in the environment. So a thing we face a lot is greenwashing, right? Sustainability as a brand, it's trendy. Everyone wants to feel good about their decisions. And so a lot of places, when I was doing my business degree, they gave an example of a company that had trademarked organic fresh. And so they named that the name of their brand. And obviously they didn't have to be organic or anything, that was just the name of their company. So that's kind of what we mean by greenwashing. We all know that companies love to claim it with no real action. So here are some red flags to look for when you're seeing advertisements: eco-friendly, sanctuary, we care about the environment, sustainable practice, even just the colors that they use and plants and stuff like that. Everyone can use these words and then they don't necessarily put anything behind it. So if they say we're an eco-friendly resort, but then don't tell you why or how, then what are they doing? How do you know that's what they're actually doing? Whereas some green flags are actual accreditations. So if you come across businesses, dive shops with these brands, and there's others, they've actually gone through certification processes to meet certain standards of like energy use or building materials or that kind of stuff for dive shops as well, that you can actually, that someone has investigated it.
And if you're not sure, don't be afraid to ask. Like obviously it's hard being the consumer or being the traveler and feeling like there's this big responsibility to have to like know when to see through their phony language like that. So don't be afraid to, if you see something that has one of those kind of red flag phrases on it, send the company a message or call them and say, hey, what do you do that is, good for the environment? What are your initiatives that are sustainable? And see what they say.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Why are you a sustainable brand? Tell me why.
Yeah, it's like, this is something that's going to draw me to you. So I'd love to know more about it.
Yeah. So what about travel and climate impact? This is the hardest one for me because we all know that flights use a ton of greenhouse or emissions. They make a ton of emissions. And so this is the hardest one, I feel like, for us. It's home. So flying uses a lot of fuel and a lot of single-use plastics. Every time I see the attendants go down the aisle and like hand out the little cups of like water and soda and everything, it's like physically painful for me. Cruise ships are somehow worse. They use, as well as fuel, a lot of oil, heavy oil use, and tons of single plastics. Like some of those cruise ships that come to Cozumel and Roatan, they hold 10,000 people. And you think like how many of them are having 2 or 3 or 4 drinks a day, usually in the little plastic cups. Like it's just astronomical. And then of course hotels too, their biggest is water use and energy use for laundry, right? All the linens, all the towels. I'm sure we've all noticed in the last like 10, 15 years, the cards you could leave on the bed now. Like they used to change linens and towels every day. And now a lot of places you could change them every 3 days or ask upon request, that kind of stuff. So thinking about these things, is there anything that you guys have done to try and like reduce your impact while traveling? For me, it's my water bottle. Like on the flights, I ask them to fill my water bottle instead of putting it in the cup. It's like my little thing.
I
Yeah.
try to book as many direct flights as I possibly can, so I'm not like jumping on 15 you know what I mean? So in my
Mhm.
head, I feel like that makes a little bit of a difference. It's tiny, but, and then the other water bottles, I've started trying to travel with I think that's something I picked up from the Maids was to take my bottle. Even when I do business travel, I take my bottles now with me.
That's awesome.
Totally.
I feel like it's become like a fashion thing now too, right? Like it's part of my outfit.
Well, and the flight thing makes so much sense because, like, yeah, you feel like it's just one person, and maybe you going on a direct flight versus 2 or 3 flights with layovers doesn't make a difference. But think of how many people are on those planes, you know, like 100 something or 70 something. And that's all those people that are on direct flights instead of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 flights each. So
Yeah,
it doesn't seem
for
like a
sure.
lot when it's just you, but it adds up for sure.
Yeah, it's estimated that emissions from travel account for about 8% of global emissions, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we're talking about hundreds of thousands of tons of emissions, right? Most of the global emissions are from flying, but cruise ships have the highest emissions per person on the boat, which I thought was really interesting. So, like, yes, we're making more flying on its own is more of an impact, but as an individual, being on a cruise ship has more of an impact.
I've never done a cruise, so I'd be interested to hear from somebody who has, if like not what it's like, but like, do they promote any sustainability on the ships ever?
Yeah.
I didn't
Anyone
see
done a cruise recently?
not in the last couple of years. I do not like them. I've done one and I hated it. My mother's wanting to do one now, and I'm like, do we like, can't we do something different? But I didn't see anything on Carnival where they were in any way trying to promote, like Shev said, like it's plastic cup after plastic cup after plastic cup, right? Like, I mean, unless you're in the dining room, they have actual dishes, but I don't recall anything showing any conservation model at all.
I think it does
Wow.
depend on the cruise line though. But I do have to say, yeah, I don't know. I saw some mixed results, but I think there's an opportunity because of pooled resources and concentration of effort. But yeah, I would say one of the things I like to do is if I'm like paperboard products, that's easy for me to flatten and take back and recycle wherever I'm traveling. If I can't find a recycle bin, I will. It's easy enough to take back, like, a Kleenex box or whatever, I just flatten it and take it back, or even the little soap boxes whenever I'm traveling. And I don't know, just that's very recyclable. So I feel like that can be for sure, efficient.
For sure.
Yeah, I try to do the same thing.
Yeah, or like if it's the hotels have the little plastic soaps and stuff, I just won't use them. I'll put them in the corner and just like leave them. I forgot what I was saying.
You know
But
what
anyway,
kills
thanks
me?
for sharing that about the.
Yeah, you know what kills me is on long flights where they have food service, and like if you don't eat part of the food that they get, they just throw the whole thing away, which obviously, but like you could have one little thing in the tray and then they just throw the whole tray away. So I've literally started like myself snacks and lunches and dinners in my bag to bring to the airport, which not every airport lets you bring food through either. So they don't make it easy.
No, I was on a flight when we went to Malaysia. I don't remember which airline, but all of their food was served in metal tins. So they were washable. So instead of like plastic things, that was really cool. But that's the thing with those prepared meals, you don't get a choice. So they just give you everything in the meal. So if you don't eat like sauteed carrots or something, like that's it. They're just going to get thrown out.
I was recently on a cruise. I don't know whether you count it as a cruise versus an expedition ship, but they were very good
your Alaska
about.
boat?
No,
Or
that
your
was
Antarctica. Sorry.
Antarctica. Yeah. So there was no plastic on the boat at all. As soon as you got on, everybody was given a refillable bottle. So you could carry that everywhere. There were refilling stations all over the boat. And then they left a card if you wanted your sheets done or your towels done. But otherwise, they
Mhm.
did not change the sheets and towels. And they were very cautious with respect to us potentially bringing contaminants onto land during any of the landings. So you had to go through like this boot scrubbing machine to get off of the ship and onto any of the Zodiacs. And likewise, when you came back, you had to go through the scrubber machine to scrub all of
That's
your
really
gear.
cool.
Yeah, it was amazing.
That's
They
cool.
were really good.
Yeah.
In fact, I even had the opportunity to tour the control room because they would do tours, and they showed how they would basically process all of the leftover food. Um,
So
and
how do they do that? Tell us how they did that, Denny.
they basically had like grinding, and it would just be ground and ground and ground. And it was not discharged until we were like miles out. And
Hmm.
all of the water that we had on the boat was um
Desalinated.
exactly, which I was like, that was
Mhm.
amazing to me to watch the process.
So this is a really good point, because as much as we've just said that a lot of us don't do cruises, what do a lot of us do that we love are live up boards, right?
Hmm.
And live up boards are just mini cruises. But I will say that most live up boards practice those kinds of things. Like they give you a water bottle. You won't see like single use cups on most of them. Um, but the things that you will see, sewage, right?
Hmm.
All that waste, food waste, and plastics. More on cruises, the plastics and liveaboards, and like you said, your expedition, which is a smaller boat too. But here's the thing: I think like all this is just it's complicated, right? Nothing is simple. So like we were saying about food waste and sewage, most of the boats will dump it at sea, right? And yes, they'll do it way offshore in the deep. And I'm like, yeah, it's organic, the food waste, but um, organics need oxygen to decompose, right?
Mm-hmm.
So an apple core that would decompose in a few days in soil takes 3 months to decompose in water. So it's not like, I know it's easy to dismiss. It's like, oh, but it's organic, it's fine. It's not the same. Sewage, of course, like that. But then also, if we store those things, water is usually desalinated on liveaboards, and so they make it every day, right? And usually with a gas generator or with the boat electricity, which is fuel, right? So they're making water with fuel with and emitting greenhouse gases that way. But then if you were to carry water in the tanks or hold all the food waste or hold all the sewage, then you're going to use more fuel on the boat as well, right? So because it's heavier, all these things. Like all of these issues are complicated. There's no like, we're not saying they should be doing this, they should be doing that. It's just, it's tough. The decisions are tough. So yeah,
It's a
where do you think these
balance.
items go?
Hmm.
And as we know, with everything in this planet ends up where? In the sea, right? Everything, all rivers lead to the sea. All of our lotions, all of our soaps, everything that we use as a society will eventually end up in the ocean. And that's the truth for all of this. And that's how we end up with the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and all of those kinds of things. So just being conscious in our lives in general of these things helps, I guess. But hopefully. Danny, do you want to talk about regulations?
Yeah, and I mean, this is also an open-ended thing. You know, people always say, well, how could anybody possibly let these ships get away with this? Why are these ships allowed to dump? And it's because boat movement is highly international. It's highly across different country lines. And so it's very hard to enforce any sort of rules. And for the rules that are there and the regulations that are there, it's almost impossible to enforce, because to enforce them, you need manpower and money and time. And you need people out there checking all these boats and making sure they're up to code and making sure they're not doing anything they're not supposed to be doing. And that's just simply really hard to do. That's not a job that a lot of people want. So it's just, and the other thing is that a lot of times what will happen is that boats will fly the flag of the country that they're following the rules for. Typically, it's just whatever country has the most lax regulations and nobody questions it, you know? So again, this is a complicated thing, and there's slowly starting to be some advancements towards, you know, better ways to go about this, but it is just a really complicated and disheartening thing. I don't know if anybody else has any personal experiences with anything that has to do with this, but it's not that they're just letting them do it. It's just that it's really hard to police.
Who's they, right? Like
exactly. Who's they?
what global governing body do we have, really? Like, we have the UN, which is an elective organization countries can choose to participate in. Other than that, like, and so exactly, like, who is they? Who's going to make the rules, and then who's going to make sure people are following them?
I don't know much about Sea Shepherd, but like I know Sea Shepherd will track down some of the worst offenders. Have you followed them at all?
So yeah, that's so funny you say that. That was my point. This is why we get operations like Sea Shepherd. Do you know much about them, Duran?
Not enough. I was kind of wondering how they they are safely doing operations and not being targeted themselves.
Well, I would not assume they're doing it safely. Yeah, I would not assume that.
And I was going to say, from like a science background, one of the biggest offenders of unsustainable like fishing and boating practices is like fisheries boats that go out and catch, you know, thousands and thousands of fish, and nobody knows how they're doing it. Fisheries scientists will go out on the boats and make sure that they're following regulations, and then within a few weeks or a few months they'll go missing, or nobody will hear from them for a while. Like, some shady stuff goes down to be able to skirt these rules and these regulations, and it's not cool.
Well, even like the regulations there are, so for example, the Galapagos and Costa Rica are two giant protected bodies of water, right? They're the Galapagos, Costa Rica, and Socorro in the Pacific, and they're groups of islands, and the Cocos Islands, in Costa Rica, and pelagic life moves between them, right? And Galapagos is protected and Cocos is protected, but there's like 100 kilometers in between that's not. And so when we were in the Galapagos, they were telling us that the fishing boats will just line up in that unprotected area, and they'll just sit there and wait for all the sharks and for everything to pass through and catch them as they're moving between the cleaning stations in the Pacific. And everyone knows they're there, and everyone knows they do it, but like, who's gonna stop them? And so yeah, Sea Shepherd is an independent organization, kind of what I think like Greenpeace used to be. It's a non-government org. It's like basically pirates. I don't know a ton about them, but that's intentional. It's hard to find stuff about them online. But they're doing their best. They will go and they will follow ships that are doing bad practices or whatever, and try and work with local governments to report them and stuff like that. But money talks, as we know. So, and fishing is a huge, huge industry.
So obviously that's more in the middle of open oceans in other countries, and we don't see much of it firsthand, but how the kind of tourism that we do changes our ecosystems. The first one that I think we as divers see a lot is coral damage. So not only a lot of divers on the same reef day in, day out, just kicking corals, brushing up against the corals, grabbing onto corals. That's why you see so much about coral safe sunscreen, because in super touristy places where people are hanging out on the beaches a lot and they don't know the first thing about a coral, all that sunscreen washes off into the water and it damages these corals. And, you know, speaking of these coastlines, a lot of places will remove their natural mangroves, their natural forests to make way for these white sand beaches for resorts, so that people can come and have their vacations, and it removes natural habitats and natural environments in order to do so. And unfortunately, that leads to kind of a snowball effect where so many people come to these beaches and so much sunscreen's washing into the water that it's just kind of an exponential effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like how could anything survive on a beach like that, right? Like all life is trampled. And two, we forget that mangroves are huge producers of oxygen. And so when we remove all of those trees, like, well, also, I think, Nikki, you were saying you're in Florida, right? Like they were finding that the mangrove that they took out along the beaches used to protect them from the hurricanes. And so now like people are trying to go back out there and plant the mangroves again because it acts as like a seawall type thing, right? And also they filter the water, like the mangroves filter the water. They provide shelter to sharks and other fish that lay their young there. And then, of course, oxygen. All important things for us. Okay, what about animal sanctuaries? If you hear the term animal sanctuary, what do you think of? What do you think this place is going to be like?
A place that cares about the animals.
Okay, yeah. What kind of animals? Like, it's not a zoo, right? It's not supposed to be a zoo.
The local animals that live in the local environments.
Yeah, that's a great point. You assume that it's animals native to the area. What else? Maybe rescues, Myra says, like could be rescues, habitat preservation for sure. There's also like environmental sanctuaries, right? Yeah, you might assume, injured or endangered animals, rehabilitation centers, animals that wouldn't survive on their own in the wild, right? Like I feel like you hear that a lot. And I think you assume that they're native to the area as well. But the reality is there is no definition of sanctuary. It's kind of like the organic or green words that we were talking about earlier. So that means that anyone can define it and it can be open to any type of interpretation anywhere. And a really good example of this that relates to Marosa trips, because we go to Roatan a lot, which is an island in Honduras, in the Caribbean. And they are famous for, they have 2 or 3 animal sanctuaries where you can go and you can play with the monkeys and hold a sloth. And I don't know if you know this, but sloths are not indigenous to Roatan or the islands. I don't think they're even indigenous to Honduras. So where do these animals come from? Well, in 2025, we found out they were all trafficked in there illegally on the black market. And we have also learned that it is extremely stressful for sloths to be held by humans. And so there was an huge industry. Roatan is a small island, but it's a huge cruise port. And so they get like 3 or 4 boats a day, which can be up to 15,000, 20,000 people, right? And a lot of the big tours were to these sanctuaries. And they were regulated, like people were keeping them, like the sloths could only be held 10 times a day. So like usually by noon it was done, or like those kinds of things. But yeah, feeding the monkeys. They also have like tigers in cages and that kind of stuff. And you're like, well, why is there a tiger in Roatan? Like, they're not indigenous to here, right? So when it comes to animal experiences, I think a really good red flag for us to keep in mind is any experience that promotes touching, holding, riding, or feeding an animal is, for me, an automatic red flag. And of course, sanctuary. I will, if I hear the word sanctuary, then I want to know, like, what are they protecting these animals from?
Yeah.
Has anybody had an experience? Go. No, go ahead.
I was going to say this is hard because calling something like this that actually damages these animals in the long run is so damaging to real sanctuaries that do real good work, you know? And it's not a super black and white issue because, yeah, obviously these types of businesses and these types of organizations that exploit the animals are bad. But then you kind of ask yourself, is it better than if they were still being illegally trafficked or traded on the black market, or if people were keeping tigers as house pets? So it's a very complex issue that we have to think kind of really deeply about.
Mm-hmm. What about, Danny, do you have any comments or anybody about what about aquariums? I feel like that's on a similar vein.
I have opinions. I want to kind of see what other people have to say about it. So I've worked in them before, but I also have opinions.
Okay.
I used to love them until I dove, and now I've seen, I don't think I could go in one now. It's kind of like, I don't think I can go in a zoo after going to Africa, right? Like, your opinion changes once you've seen something in nature. And so it's hard for me now to even think about going into one.
Totally.
Yeah,
In the chat, turtle sanctuary in the Galapagos seem to be very helpful in preserving the species. So that's great, right? Like, obviously they talk about the conservation and what would happen if we didn't step in and take responsibility to save these animals, right?
I think that's a great example of a positive one, Jan. We've been there too, because they have volunteers that actually go out and monitor the tortoises, and that sometimes they get flipped over or hit by a car, and they will find them and turn them back up or fix their shells and that kind of stuff. So I think that's a great example of a positive sanctuary.
Yeah, coming back to the aquariums and kind of zoos in general thing, it's hard because after working in them, I agree that seeing them and even seeing what goes on behind the scenes, a giraffe is not supposed to be in Nebraska, that's not where it's supposed to be. It's not its natural environment. No matter how much space you try to give it, it's never going to replicate the real thing. And on the other hand, you can try and do it really, really well. And maybe with fish, it's a little easier. And you can give these people that would never go to Africa or see these animals a good educational experience. Does it come at the expense of the animal? Maybe, that's kind of that's the debate. And typically the answer is yes, it does come at the expense of the animal. So how can we continue to give people these experiences and this exposure to what's going on with these animals and the conservation of these animals without exploiting the animals? That's the question for the alternative to zoos and aquariums in my head.
And I feel like we've started to make that as a society, we've started to realize that you've all seen that drone footage of the orcas and dolphins that were abandoned in these tiny SeaWorld tanks, right? And so, but how is that different from keeping a huge African elephant in a small pen? Or how is that different from keeping a whale shark in an aquarium? These are creatures that roamed. Elephants roam, giraffes roam thousands of kilometers in their lives. But I agree. It's difficult because I have amazing childhood memories of zoos and aquariums. So yeah, it's tough to have these conversations, but I think it's important. I do hear the argument.
I think they serve a good purpose too, to get people engaged that might not otherwise engage. And also if it gives them a love of the animals and makes them want to contribute to the overall well-being of the species too. I know I grew up in Chicago and we had Shedd Aquarium and Brookfield Zoo, which are very big on conservation. So a lot of their money goes back into helping conserve the animals in the wild. And it's there's people wouldn't have the interest. Being in front of an animal, and it's I remember Olga the walrus, all my life, where and she would spit water at you, and I would never have any association with the walrus if it hadn't been for her, and it is there's
absolutely.
And then you want to throw money in the bucket because there's Olga's bucket. I've got to give some money to help walruses. And
yeah, I think that's I hear that a lot. I think that's an interesting point, just about how humans are as a whole. It's hard for us to care about things we don't see upfront and personal, right? In all aspects. And so I hear that a lot. Marmee did tell me about taking her nephews and nieces to the Atlanta Aquarium, Georgia Aquarium, and that experience for them, gave them a love for the ocean, put them on that path, whatever. Super positive experience for them. And so it's just the question that we ask ourselves is the getting people to care about the greater amount of whale sharks in the world worth that one whale shark having to spend its entire life in a cage? Those are the questions that we're asking ourselves here.
Yeah, and a lot of people kind of propose a good middle ground as like those rehabilitation centers where you're not necessarily taking or breeding really healthy animals that could survive in the wild and keeping them in captivity, but instead you're taking in animals that wouldn't survive otherwise. So you kind of get the best of both. Like you give this animal a second chance at life, but you're also giving people a chance to see it up close and learn about it without having to go diving or without having to go on a safari in Africa. So that's a proposed way to go about it. A lot of places do captive breeding programs to help combat against species extinction, and then they do have release programs as well. So maybe there are ways to kind of find a happy middle ground. I don't think most zoos and aquariums implement them, but I think a lot do. So trying to find the good ones is hard, but it's a responsibility we should all take.
Yeah, and that it is possible. I feel like we can get there. I don't know if you guys saw, I think last year, there was a famous turtle in Argentina that was in an aquarium forever, and they finally released it and they tagged it, and it spent like over 20 years in captivity, and they tagged it, and within like 6 months watched it ping all over the world. So like this turtle that was born into captivity still knew like how to swim to South Africa and to the Mediterranean and everything, which I think is a really interesting nature and nurture argument. But like he took that freedom and like was gone, right? And yeah, Myra said like we use these same arguments when we talk about animal tourism, which we are going to talk about a little bit later. So let's talk about it now. Let's talk about the social impacts of travel and how money changes behavior.
So
Danny,
if you're not,
yeah.
So if you're not going to go to a zoo, how do you get this experience? And the thing is, in the wild, it's not guaranteed. You know, these animals aren't paid actors. They're not in an enclosed space where you're guaranteed to see it. So one of the ways that you get to almost 100% certainly is by feeding. And there's a lot of debate about feeding and paying for these fed experiences. And it's because it disrupts their natural behaviors. And there's also other things that places do to disrupt their natural behaviors in order to give you that experience that you're paying for. I think on the slide in a second here, Shev was saying how there's like safaris that'll honk at their animals that are sleeping. They like spook them up and get them to run around and do something funny or do something not as boring as sleeping for people to see. And then Shev, you were telling me a little bit about this diving experience, but I'd love for you to share more about that because it's crazy to me.
Yeah. So when Myra and we were in Malaysia last year, one of the guides was telling us about some local diving experiences you can do. And a lot of you might know, like Discover Scuba Dive is like a try dive you can do, right? Well, you have to do skills and stuff for that. But a lot of people, a lot of tourists just want a picture. They just want a picture underwater. They don't want to learn. And so these guides will just throw scuba gear on you and then hold you underwater so that you can get a picture. And this is what they'll do. Like you'll stand on the reef, stand on whatever, sit you down on something. And I know it doesn't seem like much, but Danny, how long do corals take to grow, especially hard corals?
The fastest corals will grow 7 to 10 centimeters a year. Slower and probably the more average growth is like 7 to 10 millimeters. So that's like 1 centimeter per year of growth.
Yeah. So if you knock off a piece of coral 6 inches, big, that's going to take what, 15 years to grow? And with the rate that's happening, that's our reefs just can't keep up.
Yeah, and that's
and also
that rate is assuming like good conditions, which obviously we're all seeing that we have less and less of, so it's probably even slower than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on the same line, like something we see a lot as divers is feeding dives, especially for sharks. Like who doesn't want to see a shark? And they're pelagic. They're not usually just in one spot. You can't be like, hey, let's go see a shark. So what do? They feed them. And it's highly debated because sharks are extremely endangered. We need to protect them. They're disappearing at a huge rate. So if we can get people to care about them by taking them on dives, taking them on these excursions to see them and see how beautiful they are and see them in action, then it's okay to feed them. But we are changing their behavior and impacting the reef. They're apex predators. If we're feeding them too much, they're not going to be hunting, and then that affects the entire food chain of the ocean. And so, but we also, like, if people don't start caring about sharks, they're going to all be gone. So how do we make those decisions? Is it okay to feed them now and like get sharks to stable rate, and then we can worry about changing that behavior later? I don't know. Anyone else have any other comments on that? Or have you seen it? Have you had a dive guide that like disrupted something?
I haven't been to the Bahamas, but I mean, I heard like there's a lot of shark feeding encounters in the Bahamas, I think. And I personally don't want to have anything to do with that. I think that just is dangerous as well. And then it does, like you said, alters the behavior of the animal. So builds association. I mean, like, to be there.
I'm from Canada. We take a lot of care to hide food from bears. So like I always relate it to the same thing. Like I wouldn't go around waving a dead fish in a forest, like just so I could see a bear. But the thing that I see a lot, especially as snorkel tours, is feeding the fish, of course, but starfish, picking up the starfish and bringing them up so you can hold them. Danny, do you want to tell us what that does to them?
Yeah. I mean, these are marine creatures. I mean, imagine if somebody held your head underwater and passed you around to 20 different people to get a picture, how long that would take and how uncomfortable that would be, and then just kind of threw you back. It kills a lot of starfish, but you don't see what that looks like after the fact, after your picture is done. And I was telling Shev earlier, I used to work in Indonesia at an NGO there, and local snorkel guides would like go down, grab turtles, bring them up to the surface and let their snorkelers pet them and hold them for pictures. And it's a really hard thing because obviously that's not supposed to happen. You're not supposed to do that. But that's also a local trying to get a paycheck and put food on the table. And me as a white girl from the States, it's a little weird for me to say, hey, don't do that. So it's a very odd thing to see. And it's just, I think we need to get out of the mindset, personally, it's a little soapboxy. I think we need to get out of the mindset that these animals like owe us an interaction. We're already putting ourselves in their homes. That's enough invasion, I think. I don't think these animals owe us anything. They have value by simply just existing, That's my big thing.
Yeah, I think we saw it in Belize last year. They do a lot of the shark snorkels, and of course we weren't there. Shev was leading our group, but the sharks interacted with us very differently than I've ever had sharks anywhere. I mean, it was cute. I mean, and kind of fun, but because, I mean, some of them acted like puppy dogs. They'd come in front of you and roll on their backs, and it was really cute, but it was not normal shark behavior. And it's like, it's cute, but it's not.
Yeah, you saw that. And
I want them to be normal. I want them to be what they're supposed to be. And when I see them, I want it to be mysterious and wonderful and everything that seeing a shark in the wild is, and not like I'm in a zoo with these
like dance monkeys.
Yeah. No, it definitely makes the interaction more special if it's unexpected and if it's normal.
Yeah, and that's why, Sherry, too, we opted not to go to a shark alley, I think it's called, or starfish alley. I can't remember. Yeah, because it was a feeding, and they're like, we're not going to feed them. Like, okay, but we're going to be benefiting from all the other dive boats feeding these sharks and rays. And that's actually where that picture is from. This one, this is Belize too. This is a huge thing in Belize to feed the tarpon. You dangle the fish out, and the tarpon jump up and grab it out of the water. They feed the rays, the stingrays, like they feed everything night and day. Because people love it. They love to do it. Any other comments on animal interactions? I mean, we could talk about it all day, honestly. But
sure.
I want to talk about tipping, because I think this is something, especially for people from the US, is difficult because it's such a cultural thing there. And it's complicated because most places we travel, people don't make a lot of money. And so we are coming from a place of privilege. We have extra money. We want to share it. We want to support the local communities. But it also has a social impact. And what we see a lot, especially when I lived in Roatan, is that people who are usually white or soon to be from the US, or like we hear your accent and we know immediately that you're from the US, and those tourists get preferential treatment. And the local tourists, the Honduran tourists coming from the mainland or other parts of Central America or even Europe, get less service or none at all because they're less likely to tip. And this happens a lot at restaurants, boat guides, that kind of stuff. So changes the perception, and other people become less desirable clients. And so it's complicated. I don't know the answer to this, honestly, because I think it's the same in Canada and the US. Like, also people aren't paid enough there, and that's why we tip, is to like bump up their salary and help them be able to afford life. And so it's not inherently bad. And I do try and always tip. And wages are low when people work hard. And so I just think like we need to be conscious of over tipping. I had a friend, super generous friend, that was with me in Thailand, and this was something what we had to do. She was like, Shev, I think I'm doing too much because it's starting to be uncomfortable and people don't know what to do with it. And I feel like the service I'm getting is changing things. And so her and I came up with a guideline. We were like, instead of thinking about it, converting it to dollars, because we all know US currency is very strong. Instead of thinking about money that way, think about it in the local currency. So if you're in Thailand and you're thinking in baht, or if you're in Mexico and you're thinking in Mexican pesos, instead of thinking like, oh, this is only a $2 tip, think like, this is a 20% tip of my 320 peso meal, or this is, and keeping it into that relevance within the culture you're in is really helpful. I also think, I feel strongly about this also because I've worked in the industry, is that I only ever tip in cash. I never tip on card. Even when I'm home in Canada, I try to tip in cash. Doesn't happen as well, but so many places I've gone, the workers will never see that money on the card. A lot of places I talk about Road, that's my experience there. The credit cards might be connected to an American bank, or there's no way to like decipher on the bill, or the owners just don't care and won't get it to them. So I always, personally, my philosophy is I always only ever tip in cash whenever possible. And it's something that we've talked a lot about at Marcos's trips as well, especially because it's different with diving. The tipping culture for food and service locally might be different than diving. We have started something now. So Danny also works with us, helping us with logistics. And so we've been reaching out to the companies before we go there and saying, hey, what's your tipping culture there? What do you expect or not expect? What's respectful from us? And what do we tell our clients? Because we all know with diving, we generalize like $10 a tank. That's kind of the thing. But if that's not part of that culture, respectful to that culture, then we want to be respectful of that as travelers as well. We're trying to be respectful as travelers. And that's a great point Myra said, like, and we're going to talk about that in a bit too, is our money talks. And so we can reward good behavior and choose not to reward other behavior. And that sounds a bit condescending, but you know what I mean? Like if a guide is talking about conservation and not touching the animals and not and being a great representative of the ocean, then we give them a tip and we say that to them, like, hey, I loved that you didn't touch the sharks or whatever. And vice versa, if a guide is doing that, say, hey, I'm not tipping you because I don't like this behavior. I think the more that we use our voices, the better for everyone. And another, oh, sorry. No, okay. I think another difficult subject for us to talk about is this like tourist savior complex. I feel like sometimes when we visit places, we feel like those areas need us. They need our business. They need our money. That's how their economy runs, and we're doing them a favor by being there. But we have to realize that these places existed before tourism, before people could travel. Those communities were there and thrived and had a way of life. And that a lot of development is done without any local involvement, right? Like even at home, I don't really get a say in the condo building that's built next door to my house or anything like that. Like that's not, no one asks my permission for those things or my opinion. And so with a lot of development and tourist development, it's the same. Nobody asked the locals if they could build a giant hotel here. They're done a lot of times with backdoor deals, not transparent businesses, and we are disrupting the previous way of life that was there. Like that's just a fact of tourism and something we need to acknowledge. But the tourism is there now, and choosing where we spend our money is how we can do our best to make sure that we have a positive impact in those areas. I just want to read what Pam wrote here.
Yeah, she made a really good point about how while you can put your money and put your time towards like conservation centered organizations and help with coral outplanting and lionfish spearing, sometimes the lack of experience or the lack of knowledge can almost hurt more than it helps. And you have to find the balance there. And I think that's a great point.
Yeah, that's so true. Just because you have good intentions doesn't make it a good impact. And that is hard. So let's talk about the economic impacts of travel as well. Danny, we're following the money.
So kind of like I mentioned earlier, a lot of resorts, cruises, hotels, you name it, third-party booking sites, they're owned by the same handful of corporations, or they're separate little offshoots of the same giant. And the money that you're putting into it might not actually be going directly into the community or into the country that you're visiting. So yes, locals do work there and that helps fuel some of the local economy. But I mean, we know it as divers, you pay a lot to dive, but if you work in the diving industry, you don't make a whole lot. It's kind of the same like paradox, you know, you pay a lot to go, you pay a lot for the experiences, but only a small portion of it is actually going to those locals. So hotels and cruise lines like that also have their own set of tours and experiences, and they just keep the money flowing. They keep your money coming into them in like multiple different streams and keep it out of the local communities. And somehow, because they're just a visiting, especially with cruises, a visiting entity, they don't necessarily have to abide by local laws and local regulations, but they still get to benefit off of these places. So being mindful.
Or they somehow find ways to work around the regulations.
Yeah, and even if they are breaking rules, it's giant gazillion-dollar corporations that they've got the lawyers to fight the battles, and maybe some of these lower income countries don't have the resources to be able to fight the battles, even if they're in the right. So just being mindful of where your money is starting and being able to support businesses that are local and do support local initiatives and local economies and local jobs helps to eliminate some of that problem. But
yeah, and
I mean,
it's not, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'd say it's not just hotels, right? I mentioned Airbnbs, but just holiday rentals in general have destroyed local housing. I think we've all know that, and that's happened in the States, it's happened in Canada, like it's not unique to Mexico or wherever, but you can get way more money renting a place per night than you can renting it monthly to someone that lives there. And so we've seen how Airbnb has destroyed the housing market. Canada and Europe, I know, have really come down with tough Airbnb laws. I don't know as much about the US, which has helped, but the damage is already done and it's going to take a while to recover.
Yeah. Something I'm curious about other people's experiences and how they kind of choose who they go with when they travel. Obviously, like these bigger corporations have the advertising budget and they have graphic designers and they are able to push their promotions out a lot more or offer discounts, whereas smaller businesses or places without the staff to be able to run separate marketing campaigns might not be able to do that. So how do people try and find maybe these lesser known but more ethical and more sustainable operations?
Yeah, how do you, maybe even Myra, maybe you could tell us how you look for accommodations in places, or anybody.
Or is that why you come to NHC? Because we do it for you.
Yeah, I can. Well, the way I do it, it's I usually look for, because it's different for us because we're looking for groups, right? So it's not. I try to never book Airbnbs unless it's needed, because of the same reason. And I try to find boutique hotels because boutique, I feel like it's the word where most local owners most local owners wouldn't have a luxury hotel or like a all inclusive or something like that. So I think boutique hotel for me works really well. And usually the ones that I find are locally owned, usually.
I think too, boutique, I get the assumption that the owners are heavily involved because I feel like running a boutique hotel, like our company's a boutique dive company, right? Like the owner is really involved in the everyday operations and it's not, some foreign body management.
Yeah, and also it's usually like a 3-star. So that's where I find it's the great place to be for locals, like a 3-star that is not in front of the beach, that it could be like, a couple blocks behind. And I feel like that works for us pretty well.
That's cool. I use booking.com or VRBO because for the same reason you can find like individuals who have listed their places. And I've stayed in places like with families where they just rent a room and of their place. And so like in those situations, it's not like they wouldn't rent out their extra room in their place monthly, but they're trying to make some extra money for themselves, for their families. So they'll do that. I do not Airbnb. I cannot stand Airbnb. And even if you put aside the economic impacts and community impacts, I just have only almost exclusively heard horrible like safety and scam stories from Airbnb of like people showing up and the place not existing, or like showing up and it's actually someone expecting you to share a bed with them. And so maybe it's the Facebook groups I'm a part of, but I would still much rather stay in a boutique hotel than, even if it's like a 2-star local hotel, than an Airbnb or a vacation rental.
I think it's important to understand that the hotels are hiring people, and most of the hires are people that live around the area. So Airbnbs do not hire anybody. They work independently, and this is what disrupts the local economy the most in tourism. Because the people that could get a job in a hotel, if there was demand, it's not getting it anymore because these people that own these Airbnbs are somewhere else renting them. And so I think this is the most affecting. We were in Mozambique in November and December, and this is one of the things that a lot of people were telling us in the street, that, oh, don't do Airbnb. Airbnbs are everywhere, and we don't have people in the hotels anymore. And it was a major problem in those small towns.
Yeah. So how else does our money impact? We've talked about this a little bit already. Danny, did you want to talk about it some more?
Yeah, I mean, even if you can only really find the big name hotels, or you're having trouble finding some of these smaller locally owned places, your money still has power. So you can tell these places, hey, I didn't end up booking with you because I didn't see anything about promoting sustainability or promoting your local economy, and that's something that's really important to me. You know, you can raise concerns with managers and owners after the fact or during your experiences if you see poor behavior or poor guidelines or something, and put some pressure on them. You know, you can even check back with them a year later or months later and see if those behaviors have changed, and you can leave comments and reviews so that for somebody else down the line who's doing their research and trying to find somewhere that also holds the same values, that, you know, they can see your experience and know if that's a good place or maybe not so much.
And this is like, I think, really a really powerful tool we have as tourists, but we have to be careful with it, right? Like, businesses live and die by reviews. So if we just like, oh, I didn't like how this dive master talked to me, and you go and leave a 1-star review, that's not really fair. But if you go to a dive shop and the dive master picks up a turtle and doesn't ever want to pet you, and you talk to that dive master and say, hey, did you know this is really not great for the turtle, and here's why? And the dive master goes, whatever. And then you go to the owner and you say, hey, your dive master did this, and the owner goes, whatever. Then I would leave a review and say, like, hey, this happened and nobody took me seriously or wanted to talk about it, so I would never recommend going with them.
And
whereas I could just
no, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say, I just read a story like a couple days ago that someone had an experience like this, talked to a dive master, talked to the owner said they were going to make changes, followed up a year later, and the owner actually made changes. And so, like, that's an amazing example of how just knowledge and education and wholesome, like, respectful communication can change things.
Yeah, although I'm sure a bunch of people, either personally or you've heard about it, where even if you go as far as to make a review on a public review site for an organization, sometimes places delete their negative reviews. And so I think that's why communities like this are so powerful, because we operate independently and we're very open about our experiences. So even if there's an organization that is kind of masking what really goes on behind the scenes, we can share our knowledge and our experiences with each other through this community.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Pam said that she sometimes brings extra items down. I think that's a great, Sherry, I think that's a great example. And I have friends that do that, again, row 10. There's a really, really well-run orphanage in row 10. And so I have friends that when they go down, they always bring extra school supplies and clothes and whatever they need for that orphanage. Myra did that in Mozambique too. One of their days they couldn't go diving. And so they got together and they went with the local community and bought a bunch of food and supplies and took it to the community that needed it. And so those are really cool, impactful ways that we can do better, be better. So all of this to say, when we're traveling, the best thing that we can do is just ask questions. All we can do is ask questions. So when you're booking tours, when you're booking flights, when you're booking whatever, is this experience changing the behavior of nature? Who owns this experience, hotel, tour, whatever? Where will the money from this activity go? And does this activity add or detract from the local community? For me, those are like 4 of the core questions that I ask myself. Are there more? Does anyone have any other things you'd like to add to this? Pam, maybe you have, I think your question, yeah, can I bring something with me? Is there something lacking in the community? Any other thoughts? Well, if you want to screenshot this or take a note of that, I think these are like just helpful things to ask ourselves before we do anything, really. So
Jeff, if you don't mind, and if the community doesn't mind, just know that I really like the idea of conservation. I'm also really enjoy humanitarianism as well. If there's something that evolves later on down the line that involves like some things that we could all do together in order to like make an impact, either environmental or socially, beach cleanups, patrolling for sea turtles, any of that kind of stuff. Just know that we've got people that are certainly interested in stuff like that.
For sure. I think that's a great point. And it is something we're aware of and trying. We have a volunteer this year that is going to try and help us do that kind of research, because honestly, we are not short of ideas. Myra has a new idea every other day. And we are short on human resources and time. And so, we've tried a lot of projects and we're aware of our limitations. So we did have a volunteer come to us over Christmas, and she is going to try and help us do those research, because we need someone we're going to Roatan in April. Okay, you need to research, contact, find like a good company to support, organize it when we're going to do it in our trip and all that stuff. And at the moment, neither Myra or Danny or I have the capacity for that, but we would love to do that on every trip, like invite a marine biologist, a local marine biologist, to have dinner with us and tell us about what's happening in the reef, or do a beach cleanup, or like you said, there's lots of places where we can do the turtle nesting season and like patrol the beaches at night, especially in Baja and stuff like that. So I think it's a great idea, and we would love to, and maybe we will this year, 2026. So how to make our travel more sustainable? I think those were all great reminders. The best thing we could do is choose locally owned hotels, tours, restaurants. They are there. They take more work to find, but they are there. Choose small, go for small tours. I mean, on our trips, we always have small boats, small groups, that kind of stuff. It also makes your experience better when don't feel like a cattle on a snorkel boat. And traveling in low and off season can be really great too. It's also usually cheaper, which is also very nice, but traveling in low and off season, you're reducing the overcrowding issue, right? Instead of coming when, especially US and Canada, we have all of our breaks are at the same time, right? Like everyone is spring break at the same time. So everyone is winter break at the same time. We all kind of go to the same places, but if you can travel outside of those peak times, even better. It is more work, but it is worth it.
Well, it's so worth it, because like my best memories are from the one-off random hotels and the one-off random restaurants I found by accident. If I stay at a Marriott everywhere I go, and I eat at a Olive Garden everywhere I go, there's nothing different about that experience from if I just walk 10 minutes down the street from where I live right now. So I think it also just creates such a memorable experience to do something different than whatever the big money giant corporations are.
I also,
For sure.
Shev, I just thought too, something that I do is like try to get recommendations like from anyone, right? Like when I was in El Salvador, I followed this girl who like is in El Salvador all the time. And I was like, hey, do you know a driver? Right. So instead of going on like Get Your Guide or whatever, like I just got like a local like recommended person to just pay directly. So it's something that I try to do to my travel.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Instagram's a great resource.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I know like even some bloggers will do like a local contact list, and you can get a local contact list of tour guides. I think that's cool too. Danny mentioned like my best memories too are like walking down the street and talking to someone and then being like, yeah, come with me and my cousins and we'll go on a snorkel tour. Right?
Yeah, like maybe it's like a little bit, unsafe maybe sometimes, but I feel like generally like you can pick up on a vibe of someone.
Yeah.
And I mean, I haven't gotten murdered yet, so like it's fine.
I know I am fairly overconfident in my like people assessment skills.
Yeah, same.
Maybe too confident, but yeah. But it's a fair point. I mean, yeah, not everyone's awesome. Reducing our waste. I mean, this is a constant daily battle all the time. It's exhausting, but just trying. Avoiding purchasing things wrapped in plastic and excessive packaging. Also, not bringing that stuff. If you're buying new things for your trip, A, do you need to? Or B, like unwrap it before you leave, because a lot of places don't have recycling. They don't have proper waste structures. So leave it somewhere that it might get recycled. Like Duran was saying about the cardboard and stuff, bringing it home to recycle. Reuse, I mean, we're big on the water bottle thing. We love our water bottles, and I love my cold cup, especially in hot places. They'll put your drinks at the bar in them usually, so you can avoid the plastic cups most of the time. And
never underestimate like the power of buying secondhand, the power of buying lightly used. Like I love to thrift. I love to go to like thrift-ish places in different countries and try and find something unique.
Oh. Yeah, that's really fun too. I do that when I travel just to change my wardrobe. I'll drop off my old stuff at the thrift store and buy new things, so I look different pictures.
Yeah, and like I think 2 of my pairs of fins I got on like from one of the women's dive groups on Facebook. I've gone to like local dive shops and cycled through their lightly used and serviced gear, and I mean there's so much good stuff that you can find secondhand, and a lot of it is brand new and never out of the packaging, but somebody just didn't use it or they got the wrong thing and can't return it. So there's so many good deals out there. You just have to take a little bit of an extra step to find it.
Facebook Marketplace too, I think is great. Yeah,
my entire apartment is Facebook Marketplace, and it's
yeah. And less packaging, right? You're also reducing packaging and delivery costs, all that kind of stuff. Emma was saying she always asks local recommendations. That's great. I think Facebook groups are a great resource for that. You can post in, like, there's always local Facebook groups for everywhere, or Instagram, like Nikki was saying. So what does responsible travel look like? Asking questions, choosing ethical operators as much as you can, minimizing our waste, respecting wildlife, and leaving reviews and speaking with management. So like silence is not going to change anything. We have to speak up if we want things to actually change, or we want to educate people. We have to communicate. And just thought we would share how we do it. Myra shared about how she looks for accommodations, but our MHT pipeline of choosing who we work with is, first of all, we look for our sustainability goals. So we have a mission statement. We have something that we're thriving to work towards. And that's the first thing we look for in accommodations and dive shops. And then we look for locally owned by a national. And then we look, if we can't find that, then we'll find a locally owned by a foreigner that lives full-time in the area. And then we also try and find women-owned, of course. That's a big part of our business. So if we can hit all of them, it's really awesome. It's really hard to do, but we can at least get 2 or 3 of these with every place that we go. And that is all. Thank you, everyone, for sticking with us. I would love to hear your final thoughts. Is there anything from our call tonight that stood out to you? Were you surprised by anything? Let us know. What are your comments? How are you feeling? Anything that's like percolating on your brain?
No, I really like this. It was great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't know that there was a downside, as you explained, with Airbnb. So you had me rethink that a little bit. So, yeah.
I like the idea of asking questions, like be more inquisitive about where you go.
Yeah, for sure. Just awareness, right? That's the first step, education. Yeah.
Yeah, also, if you guys have another idea of how we can follow up with these calls, or what other things we can do, because if we're here, it's because we care about these things and because you've thought about it. So if you have anything, any insight, maybe not right now, maybe just sleep on it and then just text me or something and tell me, hey, it would be great to do, I don't know, whatever. And we will definitely try to follow up with this, because I think it's important that every traveler, even if we don't if we don't do the right things all the time, at least we're aware of what we're doing, you know? So it's more about, yeah, we're trying our best, but it's really hard in this world to do perfect. But at least we are aware, and then we can communicate to others what is the best
Mhm.
direction or the best course of action that we can take within our possibilities.
Yeah, there's a really great quote I love that's like, we don't need everyone doing everything perfectly. We need everyone trying and just doing something. Like, we don't need everyone doing sustainability perfectly. We just need everyone doing a little bit, and we'll get further ahead than we are now.
Yeah, I think like once you know better, just like do better, right? If you didn't know, that's okay, but once you do know, like then
Yeah.
it's important, I think. And
Yeah.
I'm vegan, so whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
for
threw
those same
that in
reasons.
there, right?
Yeah.
But I say the same thing, Shev. Like, I think a lot of people get scared of the crazy vegans because they feel like they have to be perfect. And I always say, like, I get it, but also I think it's just more important that people just reduce the consumption. Because if you have,
that actually was a vegan vote. Yeah. Sorry.
if you have so many more people, just like reducing a little bit, you do less harm, right? Instead of you have 10 people do it perfectly, like, okay, great job, like, good on you, right? And I think that's a ego. So
Well, and that's what's so
do better.
cool is because like I'm vegetarian. I've been vegetarian for 7 or 8 years now, and people are like, oh, well, what's me changing my diet gonna do? And it's like, if you just look at the last like 5 or 10 years, how many protein substitutes have become very popular and very like widely accessible. Like that came because of the demand for people wanting to reduce their meat consumption. So those little things do make a difference over time.
Yeah, I'm just having these conversations, right? And like I always say, like I'm always the token vegan, and not being pushy, right, or like making people feel bad, but just like having them question it.
Just question it.
Yeah, like because I mean I had them even in Puerto Rico, right? With one of the guides. Like I'm like, I get it, but like, and I understand what you're saying, but also like think about what you're saying, right? Like I understand, and it's like your way of life, but just even having those conversations in like a respectful way, I think is
and the reality is that we live in a buyer beware world, which really, really sucks, and it's really hard and it's exhausting. And so, yeah, if you weren't having these conversations, if you weren't here, if you weren't interested in talking about this, like, you might not know that the Sandals Resort in Cancun is owned by like a multi-billionaire from France, and, all the money that you spend there is just going back to him. Like what Danny said, all these companies have money to promote, to advertise, and it's hard to try and do everything. We can't. It's just, we also have to like work and survive and be with our families.
And like you guys like having this call and us having this conversation, like, is like a ripple effect, right? Like we can go back and we can talk to like our friends or our family and help them like understand better their choices, right? So
yeah, and just question everything. I think that's a great takeaway from this call, is to just ask these questions. Well,
Nikki
we're gonna
has
do
a
this
great
again.
hat. So Nikki has a great hat. It says vegan AF. So
my
it
travel
does start.
hat.
So even for us carnivores, it starts a great conversation just because of her hat makes everybody laugh.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. These are all really great takeaways. And we love to talk about conservation. We're going to keep talking about it. What you were just saying, Nikki, something that came up for me, or comes up all the time, is like talking about sharks. I feel like, especially with diving, telling my friends and family about diving, they're like, aren't you afraid of sharks? And so when I was home for Christmas over the holidays, I had so many conversations, and even just like flatting into conversations where, my sister-in-law will say to my 4-year-old nephew, oh, the shark's going to eat you. And I'll be like, well, actually, like, shark doesn't care about you. It doesn't smell you, doesn't like. Sure. And so, like, those are huge culture shifts that we need to make. And so Danny's going to tell us a lot more about that in March. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your call, Danny?
Yeah, so I don't know if anybody here has taken the Patty Shark Aware specialty or if you came to our version of this a little over a year ago, but we're going to spruce it up and add a lot more fun facts and a lot more knowledge about some basic shark biology, about some of their behaviors, why they do what they do, and why we should care about them. You know, we're going to talk about some of those kind of hot button items like feeding and about cage diving and about shark tourism, and just give as much information as we can and just arm you with as much information as possible to be able to take to your friends and to take to your families and to keep in mind when you're diving in other places in the world. So I'm super excited to host this again, and I hope you guys will join me.
It's super interesting. I love it. And because Danny's an expert too, which is great. I love learning from experts. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We hope to see you at that conservation call. And keep in touch with us. We do a lot of stuff, and we have our Instagram, we have our Facebook, we have our YouTube channel where these calls get posted. So if you felt like you have a friend or family that might really enjoy it, you can send them the link. I'll post that tomorrow. We keep all of our calls information like this on our website, marjosatrips.com/sisters. Or if you just go to our homepage, you can find a lot of stuff under our courses area too. Thank you for being here. It's really cool and encouraging to see people interested in these topics and people that care. So that's encouraging for all of us. And we hope to see you at a Sisters event really soon.
Thank you all.